Welcome back. Now, one of the biggest influences on the price of residential property in Ireland is the large number of vacant stock around the country.
Here to highlight the impact of vacant completed houses and apartments are our regular Property Watch team, Angela Keegan from MyHome.ie and Karl Deeter of Irish Mortgage Brokers. Good to see you again.
Lovely to see you.
OK, well, let's get straight down to it. How many of these properties are on the market?
Well, on the market, there would be 23,250 to be exact, but that's just one section of it, because a study which I think is widely appreciated by the industry was one done by the Department of Environment, Heritage and Local Government last October, and they did a physical count. I think it took them 2 years to complete it, and there are over 150,000 units around the country that have actually been given planning permission. Okay. Now, there's circa 60,000 which haven't yet started. There's 23,250 which are ready to walk into in the morning.
So why are they planning all these new houses when there's all this empty stock?
Well, that's the question. There's nobody building them as yet, because there's 23,250 built that we've got to move, and then there's another 20,000, I think, weathered and more in various stages of construction.
Well, it's a lot of figures here, Karl. Basically, what does it mean? We've got all these empty houses and apartments around the country. So how is it affecting the price of property?
It has a downward pressure on price. I think anybody understands that if you're looking for something and it has no scarcity value, that the price of it won't be increasing. And certainly when you have around 14.7% unemployment, you don't have a dearth of people looking to go out and rush to buy property. Mm-hmm. Really, I think what the long-term solution will need to be is to take all of these properties and fire sale them. They keep saying in the papers that we don't want a fire sale, but I can't see what option will clear out everything to market clearing prices if we don't have it. And that's one of the very key areas that an up-and-coming auction will be covering. There is an auction coming up, an Allsop space auction, which will look to get market clearing prices in many areas, and I for one welcome that, because transactions are what's key to the market, not price levels.
OK, well, I wanted to take a look at some of the typical vacant stock that's on the market. So I paid a visit to an apartment near the Phoenix Park in Dublin. It was built 2 years ago. It's still on the market, but at a remarkable reduction in its original price. Have a look at this. The landscape gardens are well maintained and pretty on the eye. The surroundings, yes, quite lavish. The properties themselves, quite beautiful. But despite all this, they're still not moving. The development here began pre-recession, I would imagine.
Yeah, the site here would have started certainly going back around 2000, early 2000s. You know, there was a lot of work done, a lot of units built and sold, you know, before the recession started. Yeah,
before the proverbial hit the fan.
Yeah, before we hit the wall, yeah.
When that happened, though, it eventually got to a point where building did stop on site.
Yeah, they would have stopped construction here, I suppose, about 3 years ago.
Is it difficult to sell a property like this?
To sell anything at the moment, Martin, is difficult. You know, the market is not as active as we'd like it to be. Credit is certainly very difficult. You know, the banks aren't lending as much. Their criteria has changed. It's much harder to lend. And obviously, if you're selling property, you have to have a functioning banking system. So obviously, the quicker the government can get that right, the better for all of us. I think in terms of overall supply probably is not the major issue out there. The DOE did a very, very good survey recently, you know, on unoccupied dwellings, and there's an awful lot less in the major urban areas than people thought. So supply really isn't the issue.
This is the show apartment here. Beautiful, beautiful apartment. What is this selling for?
Well, no, thanks for saying it. And it is a lovely apartment. Like this is selling for $255.
Originally, now?
Originally, it would have been twice that. Prices,
really?
Yeah, prices are down, you know, 50%. Yeah.
We're led to believe it's not as much as 50% by others, but you're saying.
Well, there are some of the surveys out there. The permanent TSB, you know, surveys is showing 38%, but that actually is based on mortgages drawn down, so it's about 9 months to a year out of date. If you talk to anybody, you know, or look at most of the surveys, you know, prices are down by 50%, and there certainly is very good value out there. Somebody's looking to buy, they're getting great value at the moment. They're getting very good property, you know, like this one here, you know, very well finished, you know, very well located at a good price.
But how long has this been on the market? And this is, like I have said, it's a gorgeous apartment. It is. I'm looking at the cooker. Barely. In fact, it hasn't been used at all because it hasn't been occupied. Yeah. But how long has this one been on the market?
Well, this would be finished 2 years at this stage.
That's at a high spec but at a ridiculous knockdown price at this stage. How many of these are on the market, and what are the worst affected areas?
Well, Dublin, as I'd say, is one of the best areas in that as the market returns, Dublin should run through the supply of completed units within a year. And contrast that to the northwest, and you have Leitrim, Longford, Cavan, Roscommon, and incidentally Laois, which, you know, would have way oversupply. We did a study only in the last couple of weeks as to the number of vacant units per 1,000 of the population.
Okay.
And the best areas, when I say the best areas, the areas with the least completed stock would be the likes of Waterford, Limerick, Kildare, Wicklow. And the state average would be 5.48 vacant units per 1,000 of the population. That goes up to 19 when you get to Longford. You know, so and if you look at areas such as Longford, Leitrim, you're talking about, you know, years, absolutely years for the current supply to run through, if it ever will run through.
Okay, well, when you look at, say the likes of Laois, and you look at Cavan as well, Longford, they were becoming, in the, you know, 6-7 years ago, they were part of the commuter belt to Dublin because people couldn't afford to buy in and around the city.
Laois, for example, Laois was absolutely becoming the commuter belt, and what was happening, and what we've seen happen, and that's, as I said, Laois is only one example. Builders and developers were developing for a Dublin market, which they thought was going to continue. And what's happened in pockets all around the country, particularly the edges of the commuter belt, there are houses finished to a high spec, family units, which would have at one stage been attractive to a Dublin audience. And they're there built, left empty.
You picked one out for us, did you?
I did,
yeah.
I picked one out in Laois. Aston Homes have it, and it's in, if I'm pronouncing it right, Ahar Naharna, off the Stradbally Road in Laois. Really beautiful detached houses, 3 and 4 bed, finished to a very high spec, you know, walking distance to the town, to parks, schools, etc. So you would say it ticks all the boxes if you want to live in commuter belt area. But what we found now is that market has collapsed, and that's good value. They're on the market, what did represent good value, but they're on the market now at 215k. My view is they're not going to move at that.
Good value if you can get a mortgage.
So but you think they're not going to move at that, they're going to drop?
Well, I think there's so many of them, and I've just picked out one example. I think the price definitely has to be negotiable.
Yeah.
Wow.
It's interesting because when we hear about good value, and for instance in the package we heard that property had been finished and completed, ready to go for 2 years, but that it represented good value. And I just don't see those as compatible statements. If it was good value, it wouldn't be on the market for 2 years. So again, I think that what we're ultimately looking at is that properties that aren't selling, the price will continue to go down. So for people who may be bidding on those properties, I think it's vital that you effectively go in with what you think the value is. And if the particular seller doesn't agree with it, then just don't bid on that property and find another one in the area, a comparable, and bid on that one. You will find eventually that one of your bids, when it is accepted eventually, will be at that area where the two things meet, where the seller and the buyer are meeting. But certainly, what used to be the commuter belt is now back to what it was. It's County Laois, it's not Dublin commuter, because people are not willing to live there to commute because the dynamics have changed. They're not saying, listen, I'll sacrifice quality of life with a 2-hour drive anymore, because you can get the same thing within Dublin City, for instance. And that's something that I think is vital to understand.
Well, Sybil pointed out, that's if you can get a mortgage.
Yeah,
Exactly.
and there's big news for people this week who are on trackers, right? Thursday is D-Day?
Yeah, Thursday is going to be a big day because it's fully expected that Taoiseach will increase the base rate in Europe by about 25 basis points, or 1/4%. That means that everyone so far who on trackers has avoided all of the rate increases that we saw over the last 2 years, where banks were just pushing up variable rates on their own discretion. They're finally going to be feeling it as well, and that's going to affect about 400,000 households. It is an inevitable day because rates can't stay low forever, but at the same time it's interesting because the ECB are looking at this inflation that we're getting, and it's largely driven by food prices, by energy prices, but actual countries themselves, other than Germany perhaps, they're not recovering the way that warrants a rate increase. You take the likes of Spain, they're showing 2.6 inflation, but they've got 20% unemployment. Those, again, are things that are contradictory terms, and I think that Taoiseach, if he goes too far, too fast, actually does run the risk of derailing the European economy, I should say.
Okay. We could talk about it for a long time.
And we will next time you're back.
We'll see you again after this big distressed auction that's coming up on the 15th in the Shelburne, which is going to give us a great indication of what people are prepared to pay. So we'll speak to you both after that auction. Thanks for coming on this morning.
Good to see you this morning.
Now, don't forget, if you've missed any of the programme, you can catch it online at tv3.ie/The Morning Show.
Coming up tomorrow, following her divorce and her